Hey, all you rad dads out there.
I really want to thank you for coming on the Rad Dad show. We talked about before. We've been talking about this for a long time, so it's great to finally have you here. And I'm going to start the way we always do, and that's by asking, who are you?
My name is Stephen Egerton. I am the guitar player for the Descendants, and I'm Sophie and Felix's dad, and I'm Nat's husband. That's pretty much what I do with my life. Yeah.
That's the high notes for you, and yeah, it's neat you include your kids in that description for sure. A lot of people who are watching or listening are going to know you from the Descendants or All or Flag or the many other projects that you've done, but yeah, you're a family man too, and so that's why you're here today is to talk about your family. So you've got two kids, and you live in Tulsa, correct?
That's right, Tulsa, Oklahoma. This is where Nat, my wife, she grew up here. She spent a large part of her life here, and her father is her father lived here since the 50s, in the same house that he's in now, amazingly.
Wow.
So Nat grew up in that house, and that gives you a kind of a sense of their familial structure. It's been, they're a very tight-knit family. We're very close with them. And yeah, so we live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yeah, right out here
Yeah.
in the middle.
And you grew up in Salt Lake, right?
I did, yes. So did, yeah, myself and Carl Alvarez, our bass player too. We grew up in Salt Lake. Neither of us are from there, but we both grew up there. We met in seventh grade. We've been hanging
Yep.
out since a very long time now.
So it's interesting. I've heard you speak on some other podcasts and interviews and stuff about your experience in Salt Lake, and yeah, like I may be diverting a little bit from the parenting stuff here for a second, but I thought it was interesting because obviously huge Mormon contingent there, right? And
Right.
just that was sort of like the vibe around there. And where I grew up actually, and so I'm from Medicine Hat, Alberta,
Hmm.
so kind of southeastern Alberta, and big Mormon population there as well. So I related
Oh,
to a lot of those. I'm not Mormon. I didn't grow up in Mormon faith, really any faith at all, but definitely grew up around it. Yeah, it was kind of interesting having that around. I know you talked on Damien's podcast about your first date with taking your girlfriend to
to
a
see
Mormon girl to
Zappa.
Zappa or
Oh
something like
God.
that, right?
Yeah,
And
that just shows a couple of worlds colliding deeply. That was hilarious. Yeah.
yeah, I have to
But
have to wonder what her parents thought of that.
yeah, I'm not sure that. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we let's just say that our budding junior high relationship didn't last much longer after that. So
Yeah.
I never really got a great feel for what they thought of that. Um, but to be to reflect a little bit on the Mormon part of it. My father was the sort of black sheep of a big Mormon family. My grandmother descended from the earliest Mormon pioneers.
Wow.
So who settled Utah? I mean, she goes right back to the beginning of the settlement in Utah. Um, but for no reason I'll ever understand, she decided to marry a beer drinking, cigarette smoking Catholic and remain locked in battle for him for the rest of her life. That's so very, my dad came from a very strange thing, but I think he was like, yeah, I'm not part of any of this thing. But the Mormons that I grew up around, I have to say, there was, I'm not a person of faith, but there's, you know, they had a nice community structure in a lot of ways. There's a massive family dynamic there. You probably know about family home evening on Monday nights, and that thing, really did. I mean, if you were dealing with a Mormon one-on-one, face-to-face, it was usually a pretty good experience. It wasn't,
Totally.
you weren't going to get your ass handed to you by them. They were overall, very reasonable around. We had, my neighbors were really nice. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
so, there are certainly things that I would not, probably agree with about, church doctrine and so on. That's not my scene at all. But on a day-to-day level, it wasn't a bad, bad group of people to grow up around at all. I'd have to
No,
say
I
that.
found exactly the same thing. Like a lot of the kids I went to high school with or whatever who were part of the Mormon faith, like they had lots of fun too. Like it was fun being around them. They were,
Yeah.
like and um yeah, so it is kind of interesting, right? Like kind of being on the outside looking in or whatever. But I was gonna say, I had a very briefly had a Mormon girlfriend as well. And I think her parents thought I was like, the Antichrist, like and
Yes.
I was a nerd in high school too. So,
Yeah.
but just simply
Right.
by virtue of not being Mormon, I was like the bad boy. So that was my one brief experience with being like the
Of
bad
getting
guy,
to feel like you're the like, oh,
the
you're the
badass.
heavy in the room. Yeah.
Yeah, I get to, go to McDonald's and buy her Coke and let her have a sip of my Coke because it had
Yeah.
caffeine,
What are you
right?
doing to her? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, ruining her.
Uh,
So yeah, I'm gonna bring it back to the family piece, but this is a Rad Dad show. So Stefan, I have to ask you, do you consider yourself a Rad Dad?
Well, I don't know about rad because there's not much about me that's very rad. If you know me, I'm about as boring as they come. So rad probably not. But very dad, very that. I think if my kids were to describe me, they would just say he's totally just a dad. Like he's a dad guy. Like that's what I am. I drive kids around. I'm a debate dad. I'm a robotics dad. I'm that guy, and happily so. So that's so I don't know how rad I am, but I'm most certainly, committed to the bit. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Did did you always know you were going to be a dad? Did you, like was that a part of your DNA early on? Some people they're like I always knew I wanted to have kids. Other people it's like no, this
I was
is unexpected.
absolutely positive that I would not, or if I did, it wouldn't be before I was 50. There was, I did figure I'll probably get around to that. I could imagine doing that, but like I just didn't, that was not my scene. Uh, I didn't have a great fathering example growing up, so I wasn't, that certainly didn't make me want, oh yeah, this is a great experience for me, and I hope, I hope to impart that on somebody else, and that was not how things went. So I just assumed I would either not go there, probably not. Um, but or maybe in my 50s or something like that, maybe then I would be together enough to do that, but that's not how life unfolds, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when like I guess you have that you reflect back on your own childhood like maybe tell me a little bit more about that like your experience growing up and your relationship with your dad like do you think back on that now and or maybe like as your kids were growing up and try to like consciously you mentioned it wasn't maybe a great example but like did you consciously try and change that when you became a dad?
Well, certainly, all sides of how, my life unfolded as a child, impacted. There's no question. And I could look back on various things that were done, great or not great by my dad and adjust accordingly, no question. But, the way my situation unfolded really is that, my parents were more or less a teenage pregnancy. And I was my father was in the army at the time. I was born in an army hospital.
Wow.
And then we we moved a few different times trying to sort of get settled. And my parents were teenagers. I mean, or barely into their 20s. They were young, so eventually, when we were at a financial low, we landed in Utah, where my father grew up. We were living in my grandparents' basement for a little while, and then my dad decided to remove himself from that situation. So my dad bailed when I was about 5, and
Okay.
he was not really present with any kind of consistency. There was no child support. There was nothing like that. He would show up periodically. So it was very erratic. And so I didn't really, it was just me and my mom. I didn't have brothers or sisters. So it was just my mom and I, and my dad would pop in very rarely. Eventually, though, at a low ebb in my life. High school wise, I was sort of asked to maybe move along. And so I ended up moving down to southern Utah where my father lived and living with him for a while. And we did, at this point, there was really not much of he couldn't take much of a fathering role. I was already, 16. He'd been barely present at all. So, so but we did get along well. We have, it was striking how much we have in common. And oddly, he's passed now, but we have virtually identical voices. There was all
Interesting.
of these things where you just go, well, I'm getting to know this person, and it's funny to find the things that your genetics are just fucking weird. That's really what it is. You just go, God, I can't believe that there are places in common. And as I got to know him better, there were things that I didn't like about him that I have consciously tried to work against, I guess, tendencies that I could recognize in myself that I saw in him. And I go, this is how you end up in this place. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So, but on the whole, he was a decent guy. He was okay. He just didn't, he was, I think, I look back on it and go, okay, well, yeah, so he bailed when I was 5, but he was young. He had, both my parents were so young, and it's unfortunate that my mom got stuck doing double duty there. Um, but like nobody is ready to be perfect at that time. And it was completely unplanned, and it was, things just rolled how they rolled. And, I came out okay. Mom did a great job, as far as, um, you know, providing everything that needed to happen to have a healthy, normal life. Uh, so there's some resentment there a little bit, of
Yep.
course. There's some things that I wish he'd done differently, but I also try to kind of give him the benefit of like, well, no one's really perfect at 20.
How old were you when you became a dad?
Oh, geez. 34,
Okay.
30, 34, I think it was. Maybe 36, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was considerably older, and really, that it was pretty good timing overall, I think. I think
Yeah.
that actually worked out well. Now, when I look back on it now from this end, I wish I would have. There's a piece of me that wishes I would have wanted to do it younger, and that I would have, that like had I met Nat, the right person to
Yeah.
do this with, and somebody I loved that deeply, um, then maybe it would be rad to be a dad that was a little younger. I think that would be cool, because there's certainly, with me just, couple days from 60, and, my kids at 20 and 23, they, we're very close. I live a young man's life, and so I can try to kind of keep, I haven't fallen into just total grandpa, but I'm old enough to be a grandpa. So it's, generationally speaking, there's differences. There's just nothing you can do about that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you talk about like the generations. Like I think um if you reflect back, like I guess maybe I take we try to imagine like your dad's generation, right? Like I mean, he becomes a very young dad, um, but also in a very different generation too, right? Like I think like, the in your generation, I mean, your dads are starting to become more involved. There's more like there's especially at the time you became a dad, right? And so that's like there's a generational change there, right? About like the dad's role. Did you
Yes,
sort of like feel that?
I did, because I feel like I feel, that I think about this a lot. Most of my friends growing up didn't have a father around. Almost nobody I knew had both parents in the house with them. That just wasn't a thing. I mean, it was in Mormon families, but I wasn't hanging out with them very much.
Yeah.
So, yes, it was out there on the periphery. Of course, it still existed, but my group of friends, nobody had a dad around. I mean, that's just where it was. And I would have to think that that reality affected, where so many fathers and in my generation landed as far as how they parent.
Yeah.
Had to have had an effect. I mean, because I couldn't tell you the amount of very dedicated fathers I know who all come from places where you don't expect them to be like rad fathers.
Yeah.
That's not, oh, a bunch of punk rock guys that are into being dads. That was not on anyone's menu, but here we are, and
Yeah.
it's true.
It seems like, and this is the outside looking in, but um, seems like you have a really amazing family, Stefan. Like and it
I
just
do.
seems like, Nat and the kids and like you've got a good thing there. And so
Oh boy.
you must have done something right? And so I'm curious, like, I asked you if you're a rad dad, and so if we use that term like literally radical or whatever, maybe you don't see yourself as that, but you are a dad who, and this is kind of, I guess, where the idea for the show comes from, and the two concepts we bring together, like you do live a different lifestyle than a lot of dads, and
Oh yeah.
the music piece and just like the role of that in your family, you're touring and you're on stage. I mean, that's pretty rad.
Yes, for sure.
But what we're kind of talking about, what I'm interested in is like, well, what's a good dad? Like, what are the things that you think, what are the things you tried to do as a dad to like do a good job? What do you think? And I want to be clear too, like this show, we're not saying that everybody who comes on the show like fucking nails it every time, right? Like I
Oh
think
yeah.
I'm
You
not
can't.
nailing it. I'm not nailing it every day. Like, we struggle and whatever and we learn. But I'm just sort of curious on your thoughts on that. Like what's a rad dad? What's a good dad? What are those things that are important to, I mean, you must look back now. You've got kids who are in their early 20s, good people, nice people. Like, how did you do that?
I would say that Nat and I both, well, okay, I'll back up a little bit there. Getting into this, getting into, because once Nat and I decided, our kids were not accidental at all. Our kids were absolutely tried for, planned, and we were going for this. So, however, entering this, I was kind of like, okay, what stops your kid from just telling you to fuck off? Like how do you even handle this kind of a
Yeah.
thing? And I would ask her these questions and she always she really seemed to have her finger on the pulse of the idea of how to keep these things in check. Not like, oh, it'll just work out. She didn't, she took an active approach to it, but that approach would have been more like, you just simply can't let these things happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's simply not allowed. And there was, the other thing is that she pointed out that if a kid was freaking out, there was always a reason. There's a reason, there's something here. So do we dig and we find out what that is and try to address that? When they're little, are they hungry? Are they tired? The
Hmm.
very basics, are what they're reacting to. Then later on, it could be other things, and you have to sort of meet those. But there was in our family strong emphasis on politeness. Now I know that stuff, we were more concerned for sure with them being good people and nice people than we were their like successes or whatever. And
Yeah.
that may sound really strange, but because there is certainly a side of parenting where of course our job here is to try to prep these people to function in the world, and I can't say that I've necessarily excelled at that, but there is a constant thread of love happening in my house always.
Hmm.
And if I fall to the hippie that way, I'll take it. You know, that's that's really where all the focus has been for sure. And we weren't like, oh, you need to go out there and that's not what we pushed. We pushed just we wanted them to be engaged with people. We wanted them to be polite. We wanted them to and we really didn't let them fight it out with each other either. that's kind of weird. We were a lot of people. I know there's a school of thought that would say let them work their shit out, and I understand why, and I get it. But that is not what we did. We would we ended up maybe half accident and half on purpose, like fostering a thing where our kids are incredibly close, and that changes the entire dynamic
Yeah.
of how the house feels and runs. My kids are crazy about each other. They're best friends. They assume that they'll be doing tons and tons of shit together all the time. And that was true when they were kids, when they were little, So that's those are places I think we kind of, hit it on the head. And I mean, so let's say if there's a home culture here, the home culture is not argumentative. It involves apology when there are mistakes made, which there gonna be.
Yep.
And and that's pretty much how we've kind of run things. We wanted them to be happy, good people.
Yeah.
That seemed to be job one to us because you just fucking can't guarantee anything else. You can't affect anything else with absolute accuracy. You can't put a kid in the right school. That doesn't mean shit.
Yep.
I mean, it doesn't. I mean, I'm not gonna say that's not fair. That's an over exaggeration. But I mean, that's not going to guarantee results.
Totally. It's funny, like, well, I just love that. Like, I love the, like, it's just all about love, right? And creating that love and genuine kind of care for each other. And you're not just like roommates in the house and mom and dad are, telling me what to do all the time and screw them. Like, you create that real trust and care and that feeling that you can rely on all those people in your house. And I think that's
Totally.
really important. Like, so it's funny, my kids, I always tell them the same thing. Well, something similar. What I always say is the only thing you need to worry about in this situation, when they get stressed, I tell them the only thing you need to worry about in this situation is be kind. That's all you
Mhm.
need to do. If you're kind, you'll get through it, right?
It'll
Like,
work out. Yep.
adversity is going to come at you, but if you're kind and you're genuine and you don't try to screw somebody over or whatever it is, you don't get mad, you're just kind, it's going to work out. And I think that is true. Like, doesn't mean you're not going to get walked over sometimes, but at the end of the day, you can lay down in your bed and know, hey, I was kind today, you know.
Right. I completely agree with that. And there are times when maybe that doesn't equate to just, it doesn't mean
No.
that it's going to be fair. It
No.
doesn't. And so, you sometimes you just have to sort of go, well, there it is. I put my part into it. I did right by in the situation. And another thing I think about that we were pretty particular about was that if there was a reason that I said, no, you're not doing this, is there was a reason behind it, and I would explain the reason. And I would
Yeah.
say that probably helped a lot in with the young, when they were young, to sort of get them to go, okay, at least there is purpose behind this. And it may piss me off that I don't get to do exactly what I want in this situation, but dad has some reason for it,
Yeah, you're not
and
just being like
no,
authoritarian.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It wasn't, I guess that is to say that Nat and I worked to not make things a power struggle. We
Yeah.
did, we did work towards that because we just go, here's the thing, like you can't scream in this restaurant because every one of these people in here is paying a whole bunch of money for dinner. So like you
Yeah.
can't wreck all of their dinner. You can't do it. And usually and of course, if you want, I'll remove you from here too.
Yeah.
I will play the heavy if I have to, but I'm explaining to you now why this isn't an acceptable way to do this. And that's usually that seemed to kind of work out pretty well. That seemed to mean that there was I guess instead of just like it's my will against yours,
Yep.
this boy, that's where you just see people, oh God, they're just fighting a battle that is unwinnable and ultimately stupid anyway. So,
Totally.
that's, that was, if there was anything that Nat taught me, because I learned everything from her as far as how to do this. I was like, I don't know, I'm just following her, just,
Yeah.
you know.
But having a united front is really important too. And
And
so,
those are exactly the words that she because I mentioned how most of the people in my life didn't have fathers around. Nat did. Her parents were still together, and she told me back then, she would be like, my parents were a united front. You weren't going to work. You could try, but you weren't going to work your way around that. Whatever laws were put down, they both stuck to it and did the thing, and that's what Nat and I did too. And that absolutely helped for what that's worth.
yeah, music is obviously like a big thread through your life, right? Like it's everything. How big of a role did or does music play sort of like in your home and with your kids as they were growing up? Like, were you a family that listened to music, played music together? Like, what was that like?
What's really strange is that so Nat is Nat played some instruments in high school, but Nat is a person who would have nightmares about getting on stage more than she'd have dreams of it. She would just be like, oh, never. That would never cross her mind to be that person. But she does have great musical acumen as a listener and as a fan of music. She can hum pretty much any like cheesy 80s guitar solo,
Yeah.
absolutely nail it. Like so she's very aware, she's listening, she's very melodically oriented, she's lyrically oriented, she's a deep music fan. Both of my kids are too, and they have, but we don't play music in our house that much. And when Felix was 6 months old, Sophie was maybe just around 3, uh, we went to a hockey game here, just our small team. We don't have a big league team here. We went to our small team here. It was a work thing for the place Nat was working at the time. And somebody somebody out on the ice was pissed off about something and whacked a puck, which came up and just went bam right into Nat's head and took her out,
What?
right? Cut her all the way. Yeah, she's got a little scar. It's hard to see. They did a pretty good job of tightening it up. You'd have to go hunting to find it, but she got whacked, right? And since then, Nat has had pretty consistent cluster migraines.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's terrible. So like a lot of like volume and rhythm. I mean, she's still a music fanatic, and when we're playing, she's right there and she's into it. She loves it, but we're not surrounded all the time with sound at our house. We don't leave TVs running. Some people like to just, they come home and the TV background noise is what they love. Our house is dead silent.
Yep.
That's just how it is. Now, when we get in the car, that's totally different. Like
Yep.
we do all of our music listening in the car, and the kids, have been when the kids were in like junior high school, they were DJing, mostly Sophie. Sophie
Yep.
Sophie inserted herself into that quite well. But my kids are both capable musically, but not pursuing it. That's not really their thing, but they're both fanatical about it.
Yep.
Um, Felix is a huge Post Malone fan,
Okay.
but he loves his music taste is so interesting. He loves Post Malone, Glenn Campbell, Jim Croce, the Beatles, Queen, and the Pears.
Crazy.
Fucking awesome. Like, great, dude. Have at it. I love it. And Sophie, a lot of punk rock, but she's like a lot of people her age now discovering like um Fleetwood Mac stuff that was like the stuff that sort of we were all Fleetwood
Yep.
Mac, Sex Pistols only.
Yep.
So she's got a real wide berth, but she's a huge Beatles fan. Um, I guess the Beatles are the kind of, that's the common thread in our family
Yep.
too. We're all Beatle fanatics like you are, so that's and Sophie loves shows. In fact, she just drove up to see her boyfriend in Arkansas where he's going to school so that they could go see a show last night.
Oh,
So
cool.
So they're, they're very active that way. Felix is actually about to come on tour with me. So he's gonna
Oh,
go get
cool.
himself we're gonna yeah, we're going out for a month with Circle Jerks and Buzzcocks. And so he's gonna come hang out with me for a while.
That
So
sounds awesome.
learn
Ha-
learns take on some daily jobs there and kind of see what's happening out there.
yeah,
So
Rhino will keep him busy, I'm sure.
Rhino will keep him busy, and Chad, our merch guy, Andrew, our sound guy. Like between that, there's plenty of things he can do every day and keep himself busy. And he he didn't used to love the feel of shows, just too loud, too many people, too much chaos. Musically, he loves it, but he wasn't drawn to shows. But more recently, I think he's kind of come out of that. I think he's starting to go, no, I kind of dig it now. And it's you know the bus is fascinating, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So this is what you do. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you
Hop
like
in.
your I guess his probably just his like perspective of like all the stuff that goes into what you guys do is has grown, right? There's a lot to it, right? And it's pretty interesting. I actually had so I don't know how well you know Kent Jameson from the NoFX team.
Very well. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Kent and his son Oliver were on the podcast last week, sort of talking about punk and drublic in Edmonton. But it was really cool because Oliver graduated high school last year and had this opportunity to come out on these final shows, and so he's learning like the merch and all that stuff, right? And like I think that's a pretty cool thing. So it sounds like you're kind of going to have maybe a bit of a similar experience. Not like you're putting Felix to
Yeah.
work officially, but
Well, I mean, not in an official capacity, but I think, maybe a little bit, maybe. And the you're 20, you don't know. I mean,
yeah,
you don't, I mean, some people know exactly what they're going to do, and great, good for you. You're lucky. But
yeah,
consider yourself lucky because, most of the world doesn't know exactly what they want to do. So, I think even if he's like, yeah, okay, this isn't a world that I would want to live in, great, that's fine. He knows that, and he's
yeah.
done it, and he had that experience. We had that time together. All of that is great. And so I'm absolutely stoked that it's going to happen. And who knows, like, my buddy Jim Runge, who he uh, he has tour managed, on some very big tours, Black Keys, that kind of stuff. He's a buddy of mine from Wisconsin who I've known for decades. His son kind of did the same thing and eventually found that he loved that world and made his life in that world. And I think that happens a fair bit. So, exposing him to it, I feel great about that. I think that's totally awesome. Sophie, she had a more known path she wanted to follow, and she has followed it. She just graduated college. So and she's taken a year off to work, but she's, going to head straight into grad school after that. And so, she and actually she did come out with me for a week one time just to, check it out. And so I'm excited for Felix to get to do it too. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, that's really neat. It must be like, is that a kind of a tangible thing that you can feel like as your kids have gotten older? Like, is how the relationship's changing, I guess? Like, or is it becoming more of a friendship? Like, how does that grow as your kids, I mean, start moving out, going to college, like all these things, like your household dynamic has changed a lot. Like, and what happens to the relationship there?
Well, when they're here, everything seems to fall back into the known patterns. Let's put it that way. There hasn't, both of them have gone off and done, Sophie finished college. Sophie's done, or Felix has done the better part of a year. And I don't think it really changed how things seem to run around here very much. Everything seems to be pretty much how it's always been, which is good. That's cool, and to be fair, I mean, they always say, well, don't be best friends with your kids. Don't be best friends with your kids. Well, I didn't follow that advice. That's
Yeah.
not what I did at all, So for me, you know, they're like best friends for me. So in that way, maybe there will be repercussions from that later. I don't know. I don't think so, though. I mean, so far that they certainly don't seem to be. We look forward to hanging out with each other. We have great conversations. We can converse. I mean, they're their own people now. They get to have some private time and private, thoughts, actions, whatever. It's their
Yeah.
own, it's their lives now. They gotta carry that. But as far as like how we converse and how we talk, really, there is very little of a like the dynamic is much more friendship looking than it is, and that's how it worked out.
Well, I think that, like, I think when people talk about that, like, don't be best friends with your kids, like, I think that sort of makes sense when you think about little kids, right? Like, you maybe need to like establish who's in charge around the house, and you gotta, their brains aren't like developed enough to understand the roles in the house, right? They're just going to try to get whatever they can and all that stuff. But as they get older,
That's true.
I
That's true.
I think that it's probably more a testament to the fact that your kids like you. Like, they don't just love you because you're their dad, but they like you and you like them.
Right.
And like, like, that's the goal, right?
Yeah, and you can't predict it and you can't force it. You part of that is luck, I think. I mean, I can't imagine that there's anything that can, maybe the allowance of easy conversation,
Yeah,
love, the ability to talk about complex subjects, maybe that stuff that is also consistent with friendship. Maybe that availability for a kid makes them, helps them out. Maybe, that establishes that kind of more friend relationship that lasts on. And, if there's you try to be consistent and you can't be perfect, obviously, but you try to be consistent. So, when a kid looks back, do they get to look at their relationship with you and go, um, I know I was loved, absolutely. And that's job one. If they know that, they're probably gonna kind of be okay.
yeah,
That part. And then look back and is there still a modicum of respect? Were you able to maintain I respect my father. Like I appreciate what he was like. I don't agree with him on everything. I'm not, 100% like him, but no question he used everything he could to, he imparted every good thing he possibly could into me. Great. Well, then, you probably got a pretty good chance of landing in that great friendship zone as an adult with your kid then, you know.
totally. Yeah, I mean, I think it comes from trust too, right? They trust that what they say to you and how they interact with you is going to be met with, respect and all those kinds of things too, right? Like, and that
Totally.
comes from that environment of love and stuff. So yeah, I love that. I want to, like, quickly, I think we'd be kind of remiss not to at least mention in this discussion your tattoo.
Ah, yes, yes.
So
My
your Felix
tattoo.
tattoo. So tell the viewers, the listeners, maybe people who haven't realized your tattoo, and I'm going to stop talking so people can see it on the screen. So show us again.
So this is my tattoo. Felix drew this picture of me when he was 4. He said, "Look, Dad, it's you." And up there he goes, "There's your forehead wrinkles." And you can barely see the little dots up there, but those dots, he said, those were my freckles. And of course, Nat and I took one look at that and went, "Oh, hell yeah." And we immediately got that. And what's funny is that, it's like a lot of lip from me. I got all my stupid, shitty tattoos when I was a 16-year-old dumb runaway punk rock kid. And, so I'm still covered with a lot of those, stick and poke things that we would all do to each other, when we were, teenagers. And I've tried to go all the way along. You guys, don't fuck this up. Don't do this. Like, this is stupid. But I think eventually, they both, Sophie waited until she was well old enough. I think she was 20 when she got a tattoo, and she said, "You guys, I rarely go against things that you want, but I am doing this." And we were
Yeah.
like, "Okay, that's fair." Like and while she was over studying at Oxford for her semester abroad, studying, fairies, that, folklore stuff that she's into. She got a very relevant to that place time, environment. And while she was over there, she got this tattoo. And it's like, yeah, okay, I can hardly, gripe about that. Well, Felix, he's like, I'm getting that one. And so Felix intends to get this tattoo. And it's very hard for me to go, no, 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 don't, hard for me to, balk at that. But I think eventually he's like, I know you want me to wait till, my longstanding joke, you guys can get your first tattoo on your way home from my funeral. That's what I've said. I've been saying that to them for decades now. They've been hearing that same party line. But I wouldn't be surprised if Felix surprises us with one of these
Yeah.
at some point. Yes. Anyway.
Well,
Yeah.
and you would know, I mean, yeah, I mean, you can reflect back on like your tattoos and stuff, and you think, oh, geez, that doesn't mean that much to me anymore or whatever, and so you're trying to impart that on your kids, but at the same time, it's a point in your life too that was, now it's just kind of a permanent part of you, like kind of like it or not, and I like that symbolism of that too, even if it's stuff you don't really care about anymore.
It's funny because when Nat and I before we got married, I was like, oh God, sorry, I'm just covered with these shitty tattoos. I had all these plans to cover them with, nice, modern, good-looking tattoos done by, not stick and pokes like that we did in our living room or whatever. And she was like, no, she was absolutely not. Like she was totally not having it
Yeah.
because I mean, I think they were in that way like part of me that she knew and fell in love with. So, so she insisted that I keep them. And I was like, well, okay, fine. Then I'll just leave it, the shitty like flaming skull or whatever,
Yeah.
Um, uh, so, so in a funny way, now I think I might actually kind of agree with her, because this is something you don't see anymore,
Right.
right?
Totally.
This is the mark of like, dumb punk rock kids. And it's funny to have to like, kind of have your face rubbed in it, all these decades later. But here we are. Yeah.
Totally. And it I guess probably takes you back to a certain time and a certain day and whatever when that all happened. Stefan,
Absolutely.
I want to ask you and give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about what's new with you. What's new, what's happening with the Descendants? What can we expect in the next year? And maybe I'll back up quickly. You guys have been touring crazy this year. Like you've been so busy. So where does that come from? What's happening next with the Descendants?
Well, there was a fair bit of makeup to do this year, to be fair. We and some opportunities presented themselves. Everything kind of fell into place. But after last year, as you'll know, and maybe some of the people who might listen to this, our singer Milo had a heart attack. We
Yeah.
landed, we flew over to start our usually we do about 2 weeks, once, maybe twice. We might even do, 2 2-week runs in Europe each year. Um, and there's a lot of festivals over there that we'll go play and that kind of thing. So we're going to our regular 2 week Europe thing. We all fly over. We land in Barcelona. We got our bus rented. Everything's going. We all meet up at the hotel. Hey, how's it going, guys? We're all tired and jet lagged, so we all go to sleep. Go to sleep. Milo has a heart attack. So right then, we're in a real quandary. We just forked out an enormous amount of money in flights that now we can't get refunds on. We can't cancel or postpone or anything like that. We've already spent the
You're
money. We've
there.
spent the money on the bus. We've got crew who have flown over, our Belgian tour manager friend Xavier. We've got all of this stuff in place, and we've just forked out, all this money to kind of get the tour rolling, as you always have to do to start one. And so now we're just going to go home. Now, I mean, it didn't cripple us or whatever. We were like, okay, well, we can, and I speak lightly of this subject because as it turned out, it was a very manageable heart attack. This was a bit, and I think in a funny way, Milo half expected it because it's a, genetic predisposition in his family. So he, he was able to, by those terms, pretty quickly, sort of get back on his feet. He spent a week there in the hospital. Bill hung out with him. and then Bill, brought him home. The rest of us went home. Well, then, we had to spend some time, we had to cancel some other
Yep.
shows last year. And so, this time it was like, okay, we can go make those up. But um, so our friends in the Circle Jerks have been out touring too, and it made pretty good sense for us. And then we asked our buddies, the Adolescents, that's a pretty, slam dunk tour for a certain amount of
Totally.
people are going to be like, hell yeah, I'm going to go see that. I mean, how often are you going to see all these old geezers in the same place, So that tour was great. We're going to do some more of that. So, the band is staying very busy. We'll do that. We have a bunch of other one-offs through the year and a run in South America later in the year, and that'll finish up the year. But then we'll probably dive back in the spring, which is what we kind of always do. And there's always discussion about recordings, and we have actually recorded a bunch of songs, but not everybody is sort of finished with theirs yet. Um, so Milo and I we both had a lot at one point, and so we went ahead and just recorded all that stuff to get it done. So we've got, maybe, we got quite a bit of songs there, but what we like to do is have a big old pool of them and pick the best of a large batch of songs.
Yep.
So we're still waiting on a few song entries to come in, and then we'll record those and piece it all together and make something. So there is definitely music in the future, and that's pretty much it. We're still floating along, and
Yep.
everybody's still writing and kind of doing their thing. And Carl does a bit of painting too. He's awesome at that. I think more Carl has been like, he's real into tending his garden, which is, another, Carl is the one of us that doesn't have kids. So he's got his dogs and happy life with his wife Jen, and they've got a rad garden, rad house. So they're
Yep.
an old house that takes, it's a funky old thing they got to kind of keep up on. So and then Bill is a grandfather. You probably know that. Bill's
Yep.
recently become a grandpa, so he's the first one of us to enter that. Milo's kids, who are basically exactly the same ages as my kids, are both, in the middle of their college lives. Miles, Maddie, Bill's daughter, uh, just had her baby, and she's married. Her
Yep.
husband Carlos. And Bill's son Miles is a musician, and a very
Yep.
good one, actually. And so he's just got a new band that he's kind of starting up with, and he works at the blasting room too. So, that all of these kids, it's funny, we've got these kids that are all, you know, they haven't really grown up together, so they don't know each other super well, but they're all I really look forward to the time when we can huck all of those guys in a in a room and let them
Yep.
debrief about, like, okay, wow, here's all the descendants of the descendants, and get them all in one place and see what that's like. That's got to be hilarious.
The Descendants of the Descendants. I love that.
Yeah.
So okay, and we have many mutual friends too who I feel like would want me to ask you, and I've got it here somewhere. I've got your record, the Seven
Oh,
Degrees. I'm wearing the shirt today.
oh.
Um, is there a possibility in the future? Like, my understanding from the way you've talked and you kind of mentioned today, like you're in a bit of like a songwriting renaissance. Like, sounds like you're doing a lot of that and putting lots of effort into that, and maybe it's coming easier to you. I don't know, but what are the chances there? And this is one of my favorite records, and I know I'm not alone. Love to hear more from you on that too.
Well, so where all of that landed, I was never, and I was never really, a strong songwriter. That was not my suit, and nor was it something that I felt comfortable pursuing as a younger person. My first song that I ever wrote was the song "Everything Sucks," that I wrote music and words to. And of course, that's quite late. You know what I mean? That's I was 30 or something, so that's the first time I wrote a complete song. So I was a late bloomer in songwriting. However, it is the thing that I wished I could do, and but never seemed to feel comfortable doing. And I had sort of made it a mission to become a reasonably fully formed songwriter by 60, I was hoping. And that, so the last, say, 15 years, really strongly in the last 10, I've put, most of my effort into that. And so I have a huge backlog of songs, not all of which are good. Some of them are terrible. But they're all part of the process of learning how to write songs. You're not going to make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. So
Yep.
I have now a great mass of songs. And so I've been recording some, figuring that I might, I did the 7 Degrees record at a time when I was feeling like I had learned how to write vocal melodies. And so I'd write, music in this vocal melody idea, and I would offer that up to my, these various friends that I asked to be on the record. I would say, hey, here's a melody. Or if you're not the kind of person that likes, that likes to write to somebody else's melody, because that doesn't work for everybody. Everybody writes differently. Um, you can shit can my melody and do your own thing. And some people did that. A lot of people used the melody that I gave them. And so the record came out way better than I could have expected it. And that's really testament to, just the pool of talent that I happen to have in my phone that I could, hey, we want to do a song, Um, and and that's just the guys that I knew. That was like, oh, I'll send this to my buddies, which was Nat's
Yep.
idea. It was Nat's suggestion to do that, because I was like, I'm never going to do this myself. I hated my voice. My lyrics just weren't coming. So, um, but as time's gone on, I have made more peace with my voice. And so I have a batch of songs that I'm working on that I probably sing myself, which I don't, believe me, that won't be coming at the quality level of the stuff on the 7 Degrees record. That won't. But sometimes you write a song and it's just, when you're writing it, you write it with your voice. You're
Yep.
singing it, and so it's kind of like it may not be the greatest thing on, whatever. And fuck, maybe only 10 people will listen to it. That doesn't really matter. You just make it and you put it out there because that's just, you're compelled to do that. As far as doing another 7 Degrees record, I have more than enough stuff to do that with. And there has, I figured that I would probably do another one. And it was my hope that maybe on the next one, I might branch out to people I didn't know, or people that were, very far outside of my normal thing, just
Yep.
because and when I made the 7 Degrees record, the Descendants, or all were inactive. So, I had no musical outlet. It was the only thing I had. So, um, once Descendants were, back playing, and I had my band was back together, and I could, that sort of changed everything. It was like, well,
Yep.
there's less impetus to make a record like that because I have a musical outlet again. But I have such a massive amount of material that's kind of piled up, a lot of it being kind of like the 7 Degrees thing, where I don't have a fixed lyric idea. I have a strong melody idea that satisfies me, at least. Maybe it won't them. But I've got plenty I could pass off. So it's not out of the question, though it's not in the plans so far. What at this point, um, I've given Descendants too many, like they're okay, okay, dude, easy.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
we're sort of in that mode now, like, okay, okay, you contributed your fourth, only it was like, 20 songs or something. Um, so there's probably a good deal of music on the horizon, that is to say.
Well,
Maybe a 7 Degrees record down the road. Probably one with me singing just some of the goofy stuff that wouldn't fit Descendants anyway, or like, it's just not good enough or whatever. It's just something that I liked myself and I just made it, and it's like, here it is. And we'll do that. And then hopefully out of all of the stuff that I've belabored the poor Descendants guys with, there will be, half a dozen or, 10, 7, whatever, something that
yep.
are good enough to see the light of day. I can hope. We'll see. Yeah.
Well,
I'm still
I mean,
learning. So
That's super exciting and really neat to hear that there might be some, maybe some solo kind of stuff on the horizon. I think you're such a modest guy. Or I've heard you sing. Like I think you put out like is it Dr. Robert or something like that? You
Oh
had
yeah,
put
yeah,
together a
yeah.
cover. You have a good voice, and but I can appreciate your comment about like some songs are just like written for a certain voice. Like when you hear like they're your favorite artist and they cover some song and you're like, doesn't really fit their
It
voice,
doesn't.
right? Like
Yeah,
just
it
like
it can be like that.
something's
It
not
can.
quite right. So there is something to be said for, for writing the stuff for your voice. So I'm really stoked to hear that. I'm so
Well,
excited.
it's taken a long time to learn how to use it because so when I was a kid, when I started doing music, I started playing guitar when I was 9, and I very quickly learned very just basic chords and a big batch of very simple songs that I could sing. And I at age 11, I started playing in a local shopping mall near where I lived. And so I was a busker, basically. So I started busking and singing out publicly when I was very young for what that's worth, just, with all the brazenness that an 11-year-old has.
Yep.
And and then, when I found punk rock, I had been really kind of more focused on learning to play the guitar well. And, so I was taking guitar lessons and my focus had been guitar. Well, then, when I discovered punk rock, which was the music that for me sort of, it appealed to the whole person as opposed
Yep.
to just the mental exercise and the physical exercise of guitar or whatever. Um, I found that my voice was absolutely dead incapable of doing what I wanted it to do at all. It was just like I have this low, quiet, mellow voice with no scratch, no aggression, no, nothing that you associate with a great punk rock singer. No apparent attitude. And so I just shelved the voice for the next 35 years or so, and then started dragging it out. But it's taken me years to figure out what I could sing using the voice that I have. And I can never love it. It's never, I want Fogerty. Oh, it's not going
Yep.
to happen. It's not going to happen. My voice is low, quiet, and just so there it is. But I think I have found a place that I can use it. I think I've learned what it's capable of. And so if I put this little record together, it has more to do with addressing this thing that I had wanted when I was a kid. That's really
Yeah.
what it is. It's me just sort of coming to terms with the fact that when I started, what I wanted to do was be a Beatle.
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Yep.
sing and play the guitar. That's what I wanted to do. So I'll get that off my chest and then move along.
Yeah. Well, that's really neat. Kind of that full circle almost kind of concept to it, that it's kind of you're having an opportunity to revisit that part of you, right? And yeah, I'm really stoked about that. I'm really excited, and I'm gonna bring it back to the parenting thing really quickly. I just had this is maybe a stupid idea in my head, but it occurred to me that you know people who've looked at your setup on stage, and you and I have talked about this before. It's very simple, right? You got the Marshall amp or Black Star, whatever. You got your amp, you got your guitar, no knobs, into the tuner and into the amp, right? And like I'm kind of, based on what you told me today, I'm kind of thinking like this is almost like your parenting style. You sort of told me it's just about love, right? And that tuner pedal, that's the love, and then it goes into the amp, and that's it.
And there it
And
is. Yep.
yeah, and maybe it is just as simple as that, right? And you don't have to overthink it. You don't need the Kemper profiler. You don't need a million, huge pedal board in front of you of tools to deal with your kids. Maybe you just need the love.
Maybe, yeah, exactly. And, with any luck, some decent communication skills. You can try to do that. You can look them straight in the eye and talk to them. And with any luck, they'll respond to that. And, that was definitely how we did it. How, what I learned from that, what I sort of employed myself, and what, a little bit of instinctual thing I had towards it was to just go, okay, I'm going to talk to you like eye to eye, and and you'll understand me and we'll be fine. And, you know, I'm going to give you some things to think about. And it seems so far to have played out pretty good.
Well, oh, sorry, dog's barking. We're dog sitting right now. You know, I think that's a great place to end it, Stefan. Like, I always like to ask, sort of, you know, what advice you might have for dads out there listening. And maybe you've got something else to add, but I feel like that, I mean, you
Probably
sort of just
not
gave it to
really.
me
I
there.
mean, you know, because at this point, although I'm certainly at the sunset side of parenting, you know, you never know when you're still going to do it. Sometimes, you know, what's funny, when you have kids at the ages that mine are, is that once in a while you still see them needing what they needed from before.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, you know, because you'll see most of the time they're just kind of doing their path and they've got themselves figured out and they're working it out. But then once in a while, they need to revert back and they need you to be that person. And that's cool. It's cool to be able to do that. It's cool to have had enough connection that way to be able to still offer that. So,
Yeah.
so
Amazing. I really
yeah,
appreciate your time today, man. This has been
not a
great.
problem. Yeah,
And
glad we did it.
yeah, looking forward to seeing Descendants again soon and you know, maybe hear a little bit more about this solo stuff. So yeah, thanks again, Stefan, and yeah, wish you all the best and give my best to Nat too.
Will do. Take care.